So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different and reviewing the movie October Sky. I've actually been told many times that this is a really good movie about some student amateur rocketry enthusiasts who want to build some rockets and start a program at their school. But I've never really had the chance to watch it, so now's a good time to go into it. I will also be interested in some of the scientific and rocketry related engineering elements of the film. So let's see if this movie is really accurate to the student amateur rocketry experience.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Holy shit, it's headed for the mine. I told you we didn't know.
So actually this is a pretty successful test for a first test, I would say, because the rocket did clear the pad, it did get into the air, it just had some issues with the trajectory and probably the fins or something that caused it to veer off course. So actually, I would say this is pretty successful. They have a bit of a makeshift bunker there. I don't know how effective that would actually be in the case of a problem. Maybe they need something a little bit more professional.
$8.20.
Well, this is certainly one way to get some free material. Just rob it off of a train line. How are they gonna carry that thing back home? Like we're already having issues with like transporting big pieces of material throughout the city of Bremen. There are some strange pictures of us on the train with like large pieces of wood and PVC and things like this on the trams. So I can only imagine the difficulty of hauling around a piece of train track.
E1020 bar stock.
The angle of 30 degrees is crucial. When the fuel combusts, it creates a controlled explosion. The nozzle directs a river of hot gas that can reach the speed of sound when it hits the mouth of the nozzle.
So this has to be one of the most emphatic explanations of what's happening inside of a combustion chamber and a nozzle. But yeah, basically what he said here is all true. What's happening inside of the combustion chamber is basically you're creating the reaction and the flame, and that's going to be what's accelerating the gases out the only opening that's available, which is the nozzle. And if you design the nozzle diameter correctly, the throat of the nozzle, you essentially want to accelerate those gases up to the local speed of sound. And you can't actually get any faster than that because of the way gases and fluids work. So basically your goal is to get it to the speed of sound at the throat, and that's basically the optimum. And then if you want to increase your efficiency after that, basically you expand the nozzle. So you have a decrease into the throat, and then you expand the nozzle area after that, and that will allow the gases to continue accelerating up to much higher speeds. Definitely a pretty emphatic explanation there. He's really excited about it. So it looks like they got a new bunker there. It's looking a little more like it'll protect them in the case of a failure, so that's good. Oh man. So this is one way to light a rocket. Just light a match and run away. They might want to develop something a little more robust and safe, I would say.
I'm concerned that the mass of the added propellant compared to the mass of the empty rocket will be too little.
He's afraid it'll be too heavy.
Why don't we just make it longer?
Longer would allow increased volume for the propellant without much additional mass.
Great idea.
So this is actually true. Basically, a lot of the mass of a rocket is not necessarily the tube that is containing the pressure inside of the combustion chamber. A lot of it sometimes ends up being like the nozzle and the fins and the bulkheads and stuff like this. So actually extending the length of your rocket doesn't really add that much weight in terms of structure. So you can actually get higher fuel to structure ratios if you basically make the rocket longer. The other positive thing about this, which I didn't actually mention, is the aerodynamics. When you're in the atmosphere, low down in the atmosphere like you are when you're dealing with amateur rocketry, the atmospheric effects really matter because you get a lot of drag coming off of your rocket. And of course, the thinner you make your rocket, the less drag you have to go through. So if you want to increase the mass of your rocket and increase the performance, but don't take on much more drag, making it longer is usually a really effective way to do that. So in the end, when you look at amateur rockets, they all are like super long and super skinny. The other thing that we're seeing in some of these failures is that the rocket is kind of taking off of the pad relatively slowly, and so the fins don't have enough velocity in order for them to basically work as stabilizing features. So as soon as it comes off the little tiny rail there, the rocket just kind of spins out of control. If they can basically do two things to fix this. Either they can increase the thrust to weight ratio and have the rocket, shoot off a lot faster, or they can actually just make their rail longer, and then basically they're going to be going straight for longer and build up more velocity before, and then the fins can take over and perform their passive stabilization function. Oh man. Okay. Oh no. Okay, so if the rocket ends up spinning around and coming at you and you're inside of the bunker, why would you run away and leave the bunker? So you would definitely stay within the bunker area because that is the safest place for you to be in the case of a failure. Even if it had hit the bunker wall, I think that's safer than running behind this piece of dirt where they almost got hit by the rocket itself. So I don't know if that was good decision-making protocol. This is why we have like rules about what you do in the case of a failure for rockets, so you don't get something like this.
My guess is we're getting air pockets in the body of propellant. When the fire hits them, they act like little combustion chambers. I think we're gonna need a liquid binder of some sort.
What about gasoline? That's a good idea.
Okay, so he's exactly correct. Basically, they're having a lot of these problems with the combustion chamber pressure being too much and blowing up the structure of the vehicle. And even with that failure there that you saw, if we rewind back here, like if you look at the rocket piece, you can totally see that like there was an overpressure in that one location, which caused there to be, caused the failure of the structure. So it's quite clear that there's probably some pockets of pressure that are inside of the fuel grain itself. And this is a common problem with amateur rocketry, especially with solid rockets, is that it's tough to get consistent fuel grains so that you don't have any cracks or holes, which can cause there to be a sudden increase in pressure. And then you, of course, haven't designed the rocket to be able to handle that sudden increase in pressure, and you can get a failure. So they need some way to figure out how to make a more consistent grain, that's for sure.
That thing had better fly, and you can kiss your chances of losing your virginity goodbye.
Couldn't you guys find something?
I don't know if they're living in like a different universe where rockets are all of a sudden chick magnets, but I can confirm that I've never picked up a girl talking about rockets. I don't know. Maybe it works better in America or something. Yeah, my girlfriend usually just she always gets annoyed when I'm talking about rockets, and she wants me to just shut up. So I don't know if this is a realistic portrayal of what being an engineer and a rocket engineer is like. Here we go. This is a much more sophisticated system for lighting the rocket. Now they can stand far back and not blow themselves up.
You cannot prove conclusively that another one of them didn't start that fire.
Yes, I can.
Okay, here we go. Breaking out the science. Trajectory analysis. Let's do it.
Are we to conclude, Mr. Hickam, that since leaving school you've not only become an expert in rocket science, but in the field of trigonometry?
I didn't say that. I was
Obviously, you learned more in the coal mines than you did in high school.
Let the boy talk. Go ahead, home.
Now, the fire was near Welch, just under 3 miles from our launch pad. And at the time of the fire, the best that we could do was 1.2 miles, which is exactly where we found that rocket, Mr. Turner.
So I'm not sure what he means by the best they could do is 1.2 miles. He's talking about a downrange distance. But a lot of things can affect your downrange distance that your rocket travels. So obviously your launch angle matters, because the steeper your launch angle is, the less you'll travel sideways. If you have a really shallow launch angle, obviously you're becoming more like a missile, and you'll get a lot more downrange distance. The other things that can affect it are things like wind. If you have a strong tailwind, obviously that can carry your rocket quite a ways downrange. Although it does depend, though, depending on the thrust to weight of your rocket, and how long you're under thrust and things like this. A tailwind can actually end up causing your rocket to go against that wind and the other way. So it kind of depends. But you can definitely change your downrange distance with many, many factors. And so saying that that's the max, I don't know. Depends on the wind conditions.
That rocket fell for about 14 seconds, which means that it flew to an altitude of 3,000 feet. According to the equation, S equals 1/2 AT squared, where S is the altitude, A is the gravity constant, or 32, and T is the time it took for that rock to come back down. Velocity equals acceleration times time. Well, are you following this, Mr. Turner?
Unfortunately, everything's in imperial here, imperial units. Of course, it's an American film. But everything checks out. The equation that he wrote on the board there with respect to finding the acceleration, and based on that, figuring out how high you fell from, and substituting that into the velocity formula, that's all true. And if you do out the math of basically a free-falling object, you'll get the 14 seconds does turn into a 30,000 foot distance. However, I would point out that he's neglected one thing, which is air friction. Of course, the rocket is not just going to fall in free fall all the way down for those 14 seconds. There's going to be a little bit of air friction that's going to be influencing that fall. So I would say that actually he didn't quite reach 3,000 feet, and it's probably a little bit less, because if you add in the aerodynamic drag, you'll end up seeing that, well, yeah, you weren't quite reaching 3,000 feet. But that only makes this case better, so it still works.
Well, you put all this nonsense behind you, Homer. Thought you weren't going to be doing
Dad,
it.
it isn't nonsense.
I don't want to argue with you.
I agree with Homer. It's not nonsense. Rockets are serious business. But yeah, oftentimes when you talk about rockets with other people, you just kind of see their eyes glaze over and they're like, why does this matter? But you'd be surprised at how many places where rockets are actually influencing our lives. Like, there are so many technologies that we just take for granted that come out of rockets or are enabled by rockets, because rockets launch satellites and stuff. So what seems like nonsense actually becomes quite important. Wow, look at that press coverage. My goodness. Never gotten so much attention for winning a science fair.
We got the best science program in the state, buddy, okay?
Congratulations, son. Good luck to you.
That's Von Braun. I didn't even notice.
What did he say to you? What did who say? Von Braun! That was Warner Von Braun! You shook his hand!
Oh, man. If I had missed noticing that I had shaken hands with Von Braun, I would be pretty freaked out too, I would say. Yeah, I would say that growing up, one of my heroes, I guess, or one of the people I looked up to in terms of rocketry was actually Wernher von Braun. Even from, obviously I grew up like 40 years after this, but still, von Braun's influence is so significant in rocketry that I think a lot of us look up to him. Big red button. That's very good. Gotta have a big red button.
Look at it go, Homer. This one's gonna go for miles.
And look at that. You can see here, like on this last launch, that is really the perfect trajectory for a rocket that just goes straight up into the sky. So they must have had like no wind, because the only way you can get this is if there's no wind and you have a really well-balanced rocket. Okay, so October Sky. That was actually not a bad movie, I would say. Overall, the scientific accuracy of it was, I would say, pretty good. Most of the concepts they were dealing with were pretty real and pretty normal in the world of amateur rocketry. in general, as a film, it was also really good. I think it's great to see the progression of having somebody who has a dream fight for it and then finally get there in the end. I think that's kind of the spirit of an amateur rocketry enthusiast. So yeah, for the scientific accuracy, I would give the movie a 4 out of 5. And for the general feeling of the film, I would give it a 5 out of 5. Very good movie. Definitely recommend it. So if you haven't seen October Sky yet, I really invite you to go and try and watch it. Maybe it can give you an insight into the world of what amateur rocketry is like. And remember, to keep expanding your horizons.